When I first got into Dungeons & Dragons during high school, my friends who knew it from one place: Baldur's Gate. I think it's fair to say that it was probably the pinnacle of its time and place in computer RPGs. But I didn't play Baldur's Gate. I played The Temple of Elemental Evil, and I loved it. This game used to confuse the hell out of me. It didn't seem to do what similar games did. I didn't understand D&D rules at the time, and that's probably important for playing the game. If you haven't guessed by now, Temple of Elemental Evil is a game that, instead of going for an action-y route, decided to completely emulate the gameplay of pen and paper D&D. I recently played it patched up from GOG, and here are my thoughts. This game is hard. You're playing with a dungeon master that remembers all the rules, and that means lots of attacks of opportunity, strict limits on magic, and no qualms about killing your characters in seemingly cheap ways. Everything runs on dice rolls. If you're up against a guy with a high armor class, you're gonna be there for a while. And quite often, in the space of a turn, everything can turn against you. All the basic systems are there. You can't just do a diplomacy check out of thin air, but you can get a good result if you have a chief talker. Likewise, crafting magic items is a must and is decently accessible. I made the mistake of not having a rogue, so sneaking was only useful for recon, and as soon as a dwarf barges in after his party member, everyone gets rumbled. This game is hard to get right, and often feels unfair. It lacks a quick save, so get ready to go through that save and load menu a lot when you accidentally stumble into something horrible. In terms of sound design, this game makes my ears bleed. Competent voice acting stops being entertaining after you've heard the same lines over and over, and you will. It's a long game. Also, background sound effects don't seem to work properly. It seemed that most of the time crickets were chirping in the background, and it wasn't a well-made sound effect. The music is fine, but repetitive, and you mostly hear the same track in every single situation. The plot has a decent level of scope, with many ways of achieving your goals, which is quite important because it makes it feel a bit more like D&D. It does feel like you're properly playing it against a horribly unfazable DM and a party who are entirely up to you. Because there's this much scope, you can fumble through some skill challenges and talk to an NPC into getting you much further than you should be. On one occasion I accidentally got far enough to stumble into the Demon Lady of Fungi. Suffice it to say, I was not prepared for her to appear at that early juncture in the game. Between the game's size, the slow pace of combat, and the amount of safe scumming you'll do to not lose your tank to the hands of death, this takes a lot of your time. But it's time well spent. It's an experience that isn't that readily available these days. It does seem like I'm ragging on this game quite a lot, because there's a lot of problems here. But it is a fantastic feeling to be playing D&D, but on a computer. I genuinely think that with how far we've come, it should be fairly possible to make a D&D game even closer to playing on a tabletop, with all the options for improvisation that entails. Temple of Elemental Evil is less accessible than Baldur's Gate or Neverwinter Nights, but more accessible than the old gold box games. It's a weird anomaly which doesn't feel like it fits anywhere, but it is a good time, and it's not really that expensive. If you've got the time, go for it. It seems that most of the time, Wow. Ugh. Oh, that was chunky. Ugh.